folks. We hope we had a great time listening to Doug, and now we'll listen to Mike Opitz tell us about Convergence Soaring. He's he's been on the U.S. team several times. Has had a wonderful soaring performance out in Benalla, and he flies up at Nutmeg, which is just on the other far side of the Catskills, and we have all sorts of wave and convergences out there. Some pretty exciting lift, pretty close by, and he'll tell us all about convergence soaring and how the mountains and the Hudson Valley all interact, and how they interact in other sorts of places as well. So let's give a hand to Mike, and let's get started.
Well, convergences are a lot of things. You can have fronts, and you can have air masses that are just slightly different in one place or another. And it's up to us when we're flying gliders to recognize them as such, and then use them if we can. Flying contest, my first use of a convergence, or dealing with a convergence, was actually a front. It was the Standard Nationals that Doug was referring to in Elmira back in 1980. And a cold front had passed. It was a weak cold front, and at Elmira it was a nice day, but they tasked us down to Endicott and then out to the west and back to Elmira. And after passing through the start gate, it was 5-6 knots of lift up to 7,500 feet. It was pretty gangbusters flying, heading down that first turn, and it was like running into, for me, it was like running into a brick wall, because it went from 70-mile visibility down to 3. Cloud bases went from 7,500 down to like 4,000 or 4,500. Lift went from 5 to 6 knots down to 2 to 3. And it was an assigned task. That's what we had in those days, pretty much. So you had to go to the turn point to get a picture of the turn point. When I recognized it, I said, well, geez, that's the front, that just came through, and it's turned stationary. It's sitting there. And the turn point is 10 miles into the muck. So I've got to make it 10 miles into the muck and back out again, and then I'm going to be home free running this 5 and 6 knot lift up to 7,500 feet. So it says, I'm not dumping my water yet, because I'm going to need it once I get back out into the clear. So I figured as long as I could muddle my way through in and out of the turn, that it would pay dividends in the long run. So that's what I did, and I heard all sorts of people on the radio, and they were dumping their water and screaming at their crews and talking about landing out and everything else. And, people in general just didn't realize that they were flying into the backside of the front, and they didn't recognize it for what it was. So I managed with the 2 to 3 knot going into the turn, just tiptoeing in at cloud base, flying slow, going back out. And then once I got back out into the clear, it was off to the races. Got back, won the day. Everybody else had dumped their water, so the whole last half of the course they were flying without water, and I was fully loaded. So that was my first contest experience flying with a convergence kind of situation. Convergences can be very beneficial to your soaring line. At any rate, I'd spent some time in Europe. I'd flown in the Alps for a couple of weeks just to get some of that mountain flying experience. But when I made the team for Re-80 back in '85, I said, well, okay, it's time to get serious, because not only do they have mountains similar to the Alps, they also have water on both sides, the Adriatic Sea and the Med and whatever. So they had been sending us correspondence saying, well, we have convergences, and we have shear lines, and we have all this other stuff. So I picked up my copy of Segel über den Alpen, and it's in German. I don't know of an English translation. I grew up speaking German, so for me it wasn't a problem to read it. But Jochen von Kalkreit was the first one to really put the mountain soaring kind of, I don't know, he put it into writing. He analyzed it and put it into writing. The first half of the book is his stories about his flights and all. But the second half of the book is sort of a technical analysis, which, you know, is very illuminating. So I read that before going to Re-80, and wanted to share a couple of things about what he says with mountain flying and mountain systems in general. And this later on will tie into the Catskills or the Adirondacks, the Greens, the Berkshires, the Whites, whatever, the Sierra. How do you, Daniel? So here's a, it shut off.
Jeez.
There we go. At any rate, basic premise is that you have a hillside here, and the sun is shining like this, and as the sun rises, you have a much more direct angle of sun impacting the hillside than it does on the surrounding flat terrain.
Is that laser?
Oh, okay.
Press a button.
How do you press a button? Too complicated for me, I think.
No? You have laser? Sorry, there you go. Here's another one.
Okay, easier. So at any rate, the sun is hitting at almost a 90-degree angle here on this particular slope, whereas if the sun is hitting the flatland over here, it's hitting at a much shallower angle. So the slope will heat up faster than the flatland. So early in the morning, the sun comes up from the east, and all the east-facing slopes are going to be sitting there getting heated up long before the flatlands that surround it. In addition to that, especially at the steeper slopes, like you find in the Alps and some steeper slopes, you'll find even some here in the Northeast, but you'll find it out in the Sierra and the Whites out in the Sierras. The air, when it rises, it clings in a very thin sheet, especially if it's like a rocky surface. It clings in a very thin sheet, and it starts crawling up the face of the slope. And as it does, like the air that down here gets warmed because it goes over the warm rocks that are here, and it accelerates. And it goes here, and it gets warmed even more and accelerates even more by the warm rocks that are here. It's to the point to where it finally gets to the point where it launches off the top, or an intermediate trigger point, where it's accelerated all the way. Whereas the air that gets heated up over the flatland just heats up to one temperature, and then the bubble triggers off and it goes up vertically. So what he's showing here is like it's hard to read now, it's a little bit out of focus, but he's got the temperature differences here, the deltas, as you go up. But what it translates to is the thermals coming off of the tops of these peaks, because of the way the thermal sheet is accelerated here, are stronger than the thermals you get off the surrounding flatlands. And he does make a reference here, and it's sort of relevant in the Northeast, where we have a lot of deciduous forest. We don't have so much old growth at all. Everything got clear cut by the first settlers, all the pine trees, except for maybe in the Whites up in New Hampshire and a couple other places. And deciduous new growth forest has taken the place. And the problem is that the deciduous forest, the sunlight comes in and the leaves absorb a lot of the heating, and so they reflect a lot of it, so you don't wind up with the thermals clinging to the slopes as much and crawling up the slopes. Where you have a pine forest, an old growth forest, number one, the needles are more conducive to generating thermals or helping with the thermal heating, and there's enough space between the pine trees to allow the sun's rays to hit the ground underneath, which allows for more of this scenario down here, where the thermal will crawl up the side of the face of the slope and then trigger off. But you do find that in this area as well. Let's see, let's go to the next slide. So here's his diagram. In the Alps, it's like concentric rings, and there's an outer ring, and then the next valley in from the completely outside, the first valley in is at a higher elevation above sea level than the surrounding land outside of the mountains. And then when you go to the second ring, that valley is higher than the first valley, and the inner ring has the highest valley, and it's also the peaks go up higher as well as the valleys go up higher. What's relevant here is like 8 o'clock in the morning where the sun's coming in, and you get the first peaks that are facing the east where the thermals start rising up. You got an inversion that was in the valley overnight, and the peaks on the other side of the valley, they're still in the shade. And then as you get to noon, now the sun's heating all of them. It's the ones that were in the shade, they're starting to heat up. The ones that were in the sun the whole time, they're really cranking. And what happens is the air going up has eaten through all of the air that was down in the valley, the inversion. In other words, the air going up has got to be replaced by air from somewhere. And that air initially comes from the inversion in the valley, but as the day cranks up, the air has to come from somewhere else because, you know, the inversion is gone. So what happens is that air comes from a pass or a low-lying entry point into that valley. In the first ring in the Alps, it comes from the passes going out into the flatlands. At any rate, what happens is and von Kalkreuth says in the Alps, it's up to a 40 kilometer per hour, about 25 mile an hour wind that is an atmospheric wind. This system will work. Beyond that, then you're talking about wave, and the whole air mass thing comes in, and it just turns all this up. But this, I've noticed in the Northeast, up to about 15 miles an hour of air mass wind, this kind of a system will work. In the Sierra, it's somewhere in between. But von Kalkreuth says that in like the Alps, you're going to wind up with winds going up the valleys. Now the valleys are also normally sloped. They'll be sort of low where the passes are, and then they will go up as you go further into the mountains, sort of like a box canyon. They'll generate valley winds along the valley floor 40 kilometers per hour, 25 miles an hour, just due to the thermal action going up. And then as the day goes on, the west side that was in the sun all in the morning and now is in the shade, and it starts to cool off, and you got some air going down, while the east side, which is now in full sun in the afternoon, is still cranking. So you still have those valley winds going up the valley, but then you have some mixing going where some winds go down the valley. And then in the evening, as it gets later, you have the rocks cooling on both sides, the air cascades down, and it all collides in the bottom of the valley. Sometimes you wind up with sort of a mini kind of convergence with the air coming down from both sides of the mountains and meeting in the valley floor and then rising up in the middle of the valley floor. So you could be on an evening final glide when everything else is dead, and you go right down the middle of the valley, not next to one side or the other. Normally in the Alps, when I talked about that thin sheet of air going right up alongside the rocks, you have to be like within 100 yards of the rocks in order to be in that thin sheet of air that's going up. You have to be there. If you're further out, you're not going to be in the rising air. So at any rate, what I was getting at was the way these valley and mountain systems work with the valleys. And typically what happens in the Alps is the inner ring sucks air from the outer ring sucks air from the further outer ring, and the outer ring, it sucks air from all the surrounding cities and everything else. And those cities generally have pollution, and generally what happens is the day goes on, you wind up with smoggier and smoggier air penetrating the outer rings, and the conditions generally not being as good as they are earlier in the day because the air is hazier and it's smoggier and whatever else. The sun doesn't penetrate as well. So and when these valleys start sucking in from outside, you know, that's when you wind up with like differences. Like you'll have, in the Alps or in Italy, you'll have one place where you have good air in one valley, and the next valley over will be bad air. And you will have the corresponding differences in thermals and cloud bases and everything else. And there's your convergence line between you have a good air mass and a bad air mass. It's not a front per se. So with this kind of information, we go to the World Championships in Rieti in 1985, and I'd heard stories from people from the pre-worlds, like Ray Gimme was talking about, oh geez, you know, you come to this one place and the turn point's out there and you got to go take a picture of it, and you know, you're going from 75 miles of visibility to 2 miles visibility, and cloud bases from 12,000 feet down to 4,000 feet, and you're going in, you're trying to glide in and being above the clouds and take the picture. So on one of the practices, we were there in L'Aquila for a week of pre-practice, and then another week at Rieti for practice. So we had 2 full weeks of flying down there for practice. And one of the practice days, all the tasks went south first because of the way the sun heats, and then they're very flat triangles. You go south first, and then along the mountain ridges up to the north, and then you have a final glide from the north, which is scary. It's a whole other topic, but that's the way they've run all their tests. You go south first, north, and back. I had gone down to the south toward one of the recreational ski area things where there's a high altitude pass, and I figured I needed to see what it was like to deal with some of this air being sucked in, and you know, bottom line is I got shot down. There was about 25, 30 miles an hour of wind with bad air coming in, and I went down that valley at Riva Sondoli, which I'll mention a little bit later, but I wound up landing in a nice field down there. But it was an experience that I says, okay, well, I know enough that I don't really want to dive into that if I don't have to dive into that. So comes day one of the World Championships.
Other way.
Yeah.
This way.
Oh, okay. Comes day one of the World Championships, and we were tasked to go south and then north and back. And I've got screenshots here from a German pilot who did time-lapse video of a very similar task at Rieti back in 2014. So I've got screenshots of a bunch of YouTube videos because I don't have pictures myself, but they'll illustrate what we're talking about. So day one at Rieti was a very eventful day for Team USA. It was probably the best day that Team USA has ever had up until present day. I was flying standard class with Eric Moser. Eric has a penchant for always wanting to be the last out of the starting gate. When you go to Worlds, you know, when you're in the Nationals, you have, you know, sort of a varying level of competitor. But when you go to a Worlds, the average level of competitor is quite a bit higher. And, you know, but Eric still wanted to be the last out of the starting gate. I kept trying to get him to go. Well, Gaggle leaves, and we finally take a relatively late start. And we're heading down the first leg. This is the map of where this particular guy came, but ours was similar. We're heading down the first leg, and Gaggle's out in front of us, and we're doing photographic turn points, so you had to go there and take a picture. And Eric and I had gotten up, and we're relatively close to cloud base, within 500 or 1,000 feet of cloud base. And some bright dude in the Gaggle decided that there was a nice cloud, 1.5 miles, 2 miles past the turn point, and that's where they were going to go. So the whole Gaggle goes like 1.5 miles, 2 miles past the turn point. And Eric is going after him. I says, I cannot see flying 3 to 4 miles out of my way when I'm almost at cloud base to begin with. This is nuts. I looked ahead on course. I said, no, there's nice clouds. You know, I've got markers. I'm going. So I bypassed the entire Gaggle. And now I'm heading up here on this part of the course, and I'm going fine. There's a couple of early starters that I pass. And I wind up right where this guy is, but the clouds have stopped. And this is the point right here, this yellow dot on the map. clouds have stopped. And I'm not as high as he is on the ridge. I'm about 1,000 feet lower down. And just flying the thermals that are crawling up the ridges, flying right next to them, 100 yards or less off the rocks. It's all above the tree line. These peaks are up to about 8,000, 8,500 feet. These are GoPro wide-angle pictures. So the real rocks, if you look at them for real, are steeper and higher. You know, these are flattened out from the actual picture. So at any rate, I come up to this pass here, and the conditions are like this on the left, but from this mountain peak straight over to the right, it's just a solid wall of haze, like 1-2 mile visibility haze, because from there over, you go down to the Adriatic. It's just flatlands going right to the Adriatic Sea. It's maritime air. And glider flying wise, it's certain death if you wind up there. We had a very good German coach who had flown at a number of re-80 contests and done very well, and Rudy Moser had the foresight to hire him as our coach, so I knew where I needed to go was right over there. And I didn't need to go in here. This valley is quite big. You'll see in the subsequent pictures. But what I needed to do was get on this ridge here that feeds into this mountain that you see tucked into these clouds. And so I was the first one to get over here, and I was going back and forth on the ridge, hoping to climb up on the ridge and pick up a thermal and climb up to be able to have enough altitude to get over there, because there were no markers. The next marker was an ice cube, maybe at 9,000 or 10,000 feet, right over the top of this peak. So I'm going back and forth on the ridge and make 2 or 3 passes, and then one of the first guys that I'd passed comes, and he's, well, a couple hundred feet below me. Now, my altitude, I'm looking, and I need to get to this ridge, and I'm eyeball to eyeball with this ridge. I'm dead level with it. You know, and there's just no way to get, from, Daniel, it's not.
That's going to come back in a second.
Is it?
There you go.
There's just no way to get over there with what I had, you know, and I was getting zero sync on flying the ridge lift. I wasn't getting any thermals. Like I said, it blew out for a number of miles. So this guy comes in a couple hundred feet below me, and he starts just driving straight over there. And I said, well, how's this going to work? And I look at him and I says, you know what? He doesn't look like he's losing a whole lot. And then all of a sudden, there was a wispy cloud that formed, just a faint wisp that formed right in the middle of that valley, right in the wall of the haze. And it went ding, convergence. Mm-hmm. So I headed out after him, and this is sort of what it looked like. I mean, we didn't have all the nice clouds. It was one nice cloud over the top of the mountain.
The other way.
Oh, there it is. So here it is, leaving the top of the mountain. You'll see he's at 421.5 kilometers so far, and he's at 2,369 meters. He's flying fairly fast, 130 kilometers per hour. But this is the valley that you're talking about. It's around 9 miles, the gap. It's not insignificant. And right up here is the ridge. I want to get to this ridge. There is a plateau beyond it that is landable, but I want to get to that ridge because the ridge feeds right up into the higher peaks, and I know it's in the afternoon sun. I know it's going to work. You can see by the marker of the cloud on top. So at any rate, this is a subsequent group of pictures showing the transition until he finally gets just above that lower ridge where he can, where I was able to ride the ridge up and go. I cleared it with maybe 50 or 100 feet. I mean, that's going like 9 miles at best glide speed, not losing any, not gaining any, but it was enough of a convergence that it got me across that gap. And then once I got to the sunny side of that lower ridge, it went up with like 5 to 6 knots. When I got over to the main part of the main peak, it was 10 to 15 knots. that went right into a 10 to 15 knot thermal right off the top up to like 9 or 10,000 feet to the clouds, and then it was cloud streets beyond it, and it was a drag race to the turn point and a drag race to the finish. And for my first day at the Worlds, to be coming up on the finish line and seeing not a single other glider on the field, knowing I'd started at the back of the pack, you know. It's one of those feelings that, you know, I mean, it's unbelievable. So I won the day. Eric was third because I was dragging him along behind me on the radio. Doug won the day in 15 meter. Ray Gimme finished 6th or 7th in open class. And the only one that was out of the top couple was John Seaborn, who finished 30-something that day. I mean, for a team performance, there hasn't been a U.S. team performance on a single day in the Worlds that good ever before or ever since. So anyway, this is what he has, you know, looking in there. The mountain was, you know, I think 8,000, 8,500 feet tall above sea level. So anyway, that's Rieti and Convergence flying over there to some extent. I'll go back and I have some more pictures from his, some screenshots from his YouTube video to show you some more Convergence pictures. We used to fly in Connecticut. We used to fly down in here, and about 15 years ago, we got booted out for, I don't know, we were tenants for a whole number, 47 years we were tenants, and we kept getting booted out for various reasons. And we finally decided that we wanted to buy our own place. The only place we could afford was up here in Freehold. So we moved. And once we started flying to Freehold, wound up with this, you know, it'd be looking like a nice day with light westerly winds and nice cues, but we couldn't get away from the field. And there'd be even some cues, you know, with the wind blowing over towards us, but, you know, we just couldn't get away. So I started trying to figure out what the hell was happening, because we'd wind up picking up a southeast wind when the prevailing wind was west-northwest. And this is the satellite version. I guess it doesn't show up as well as the regular version. So at any rate, what I found up, this is Wyndham High Peak. It's about 4 miles from Freehold Airport. And what I found up I had to do was to tow up here into the notch at maybe 3,000 feet. This is Wyndham High Peak over here, and then the notch here, with the front escarpment of the Catskills, the northern escarpment going around this way. And from there I could climb up, and I noticed that you know, it was weak and it was choppy, and if I looked out over the Hudson Valley out over here, I could see an inversion at maybe 3,500, 4,000 feet or whatever, but over here the air was better. And I would find that working this way over to the Hunter Mountain Wilderness, the Indian Head Wilderness, that, you know, sometimes I'd have to go 2 and 3 knots all the way to get till I got over here, 4,000 feet or something like that, flying over this plateau. And then finally, you know, I'd pick something off of here and it'd be up to 7,500 or 8,000 feet in a 30-mile cloud street out to Margaretville, be off to the races. But, you know, I definitely noticed a difference between, you know, the air sometimes being worse over Freehold in the valley and actually going out over the Hudson, and how much better it was over the Catskills. So, and this is from over Wyndham High Peak, looking over the front escarpment with Blackhead, Black Dome, that ridge over there. So what was happening was, you know, I finally figured out that the Catskills are a mountain system like the Alps or like the Sierra or like the Weiss. You know, they're like any other mountain system. They may not have as steep slopes, and they may have more leaves, except for like in the wintertime when the sun can actually get down to the valley floor, or the floor of where the trees are, so they can heat the ground, and that's why you get your stronger thermals when the leaves are actually down. But what was happening was the same as I showed you earlier with the valley winds in the Alps. The Catskills were getting the sun from the east in the morning, and they were heating up before the land down in the flats. And as they were heating up, they started sucking air in, and where's the air come from? It comes from the Hudson. Right up from the Atlantic Ocean, so it comes streaming up, and I'm trying to go back here. I want to go back. Oh, no, there it is, okay. So anyway, the air comes up this way from the Hudson, even though we have 5, 10, almost 15-hour northwest to west prevailing winds. You know, so it's going right in reverse, and the mountain system is sucking that in. So I started doing my exploration in the local area and all, and I found that, you know, flying down the escarpment and all, you wind up having significant differences in the cloud base. Not only, you know, when I looked out, I saw the inversion at 3,500, 4,000 feet, but that's where the clouds formed, and right along the difference between the good air and the bad air, I was finding cumulus that were 2,000, 3,000 foot difference in cloud base over a difference of a mile or two. And I found some clouds that actually had one side in the one air and the other side in the other air, and that was right on the line of the convergence. So that's what the ones that are right on the line of the convergence look like. You get, you know, the side, this is looking west on this side, you're looking south, so this would be the east side, that's the west side, and where the two meet, and then you get this scraggly virga kind of stuff hanging down in the middle. I had one nice day that I went up to Cooperstown, which is like 40 miles north and west of Freehold, and then I went down to, I think, Middletown, and on the way back, I ran into Convergence at around Ellenville, and I didn't circle from Ellenville all the way back to Freehold. I just ran straight with the Convergence all the way. So that's where, you know, this comes in where it's relevant to people flying here. It's the Atlantic is out there, the Hudson is out there, the Berkshires, the Catskills, the the Green Mountains up there, the Adirondacks. They all sort of work the same way. They're all mountain systems, and they need to suck air in from somewhere. And right now, in our area, the air gets sucked in from the Atlantic Ocean up through the Hudson Valley. So at any rate, what I found was that in here, in the tendrils that hang down, there's generally like 1 to 2 knots. But you can fly nice and steady and fly with that 1 to 2 knots right along the length of the clouds wherever the convergence is. Up here on a higher shelf, the lift is enhanced. Further out, it goes probably a mile or two maybe, and then you wind up sort of running out of the enhancements, and then you're just in, from where the air masses come together, then you're into the just the upwind air mass. So, Daniel, day 3 of the 2016 Club Class Nationals. They tasked us to go south down to Monument, then a big assigned area task circle up around Story Farms up the north end of the Catskill Escarpment, and then back down just south of Wurtsboro for a steering turn, and then back to Wurtsboro. And I sort of figured that, you know, with the light upper air winds and all, there might be a day with some convergence, and I hemmed and hawed, and I said, you know what, I'm going to do a quick briefing to the pilots to tell them what I expect is going to happen, because I don't want to be, I don't want to steamroller everybody without their knowing what's happening. So I gave a quick briefing on sort of what to expect. And apparently Daniel didn't quite understand, because if you look up here, you can see a little bit of the sign of the convergence with the stuff hanging down from the cloud, and the lower cloud bases over here. So at any rate, it got Daniel's attention that I went by at 8,500 feet, and he was on the ground. So he started taking it a little more seriously. This trace from the day. Went down to Monument and came back with Noah Ryder and Glenn Betzel, and you can see the trace down here. And the thermals were 2.5 knots, and on a good one was 3. This particular one right here is right here at Ellenville, and it was showing a 1,000-foot climb at 3.2 knots. By that time, Glenn and Daniel were like 1,000 feet above me, and they were headed up this way towards the turn. And I looked across the valley over by Piolis, and I saw the Convergence forming, but it took like a 60-degree turn or a 50-degree turn off course to get there, but I knew I had to get all the way over there to make the contact. So that's what I did, and this is the climb that I had over here upon reaching the Convergence, and it was 2,800 feet of climb at average 5.1 knots. So it was probably 2 to 3 knots better than all the climbs down here, because it was Convergence generated, you know, with the two air masses coming together. And then the trace shows another Convergence climb over here at 4.1 knots, and able to run up to Hunter. And then the Convergence cloud stopped, and I sort of made a mistake here, and I didn't go further and come back to it. I just turned around, came back, and I wound up later lucking into a thermal on the last turn so I could go far enough in so I wouldn't be early. But coming back,
Daniel, can you make that full screen?
No, that's the best we can do, sorry.
coming back, this is Daniel's shot that he took before he landed out. And that's what he was looking at. And you can see the scraggly stuff hanging down over here. Daniel, here's the Ashokan over here. Daniel chose to go left, and I chose to go right. Clicker is getting, its battery's done. So anyway, I chose to follow. The Convergence was out here. I chose to go all the way down here.
Here's the button. Right there.
Okay. I chose to go all the way. You gotta shake it? Yeah, no, I was pushing it.
Huh? Let's see. Well, maybe we're both out. Sorry.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, I chose to go out here, and I got climbs back up to 7,500 or 8,000 feet. And the Convergence is sort of pushed around, and there's sort of, if you're familiar with the terrain north of Ellenville, there's a gap that goes out into the Hudson Valley, and the maritime air had pushed around the Shawangunks and all, and was coming back into Ellenville from the northeast. And that's where it sort of was. It got there and around, and then went down for the last turn and all. So at any rate, Daniel got serious about taking pictures and trying to find these Convergence lines that I was talking about. I personally haven't taken any pictures, so I'm grateful that he did. So from his Facebook posts, here's some examples. Now this is on April 14th and 17th. He's coming up from Blairstown up the ridge, and this is where there's not a whole lot of moisture in the air, but the moisture shows up as a Convergence line. In the Sierra, out there, out west, sometimes all you see is a nice line of clouds, and everywhere else is dry and blue. And the nice line of clouds is where the two slightly different air masses are coming together and being a Convergence. So on this particular day, that's what it was. And this picture, he gets closer, and you can start to see some of it. You can see how the clouds aren't really well defined. They're indicating sort of turbulent air as opposed to a normal queue. You can see little things hanging out of here. I know the resolution in this light isn't too good, but you can start to see stuff hanging down out of the bottom of that queue. You want to be on the good air side, in this case the west side, the upwind side. And let's see, was this going up?
Yep.
Yeah, it's still going up. This particular queue, it's obscured by the yaw string, but that shelf that I drew going out over the good air, this queue is splitting right the line where the Convergence, where the air masses come together. You have some tendrils hanging down here, and the upper shelf is starting to reach out. And you want to be right here underneath the upper shelf, just out in front. And you want to basically follow that line to stay with the convergence zone. Here's, you know, the convergence. You can see some of the cloud over here doing the same kind of thing. Differences in the cloud bases. Is this going back now?
No, I'm still going north.
Still going north?
Now I'm going.
Then now he's going back. And here, this finger pointing out to the west, that edge of the cloud, that's where it is. Of course, I mean, and that's the only indicator you have in the sky. The rest of it's blue. You know, so this is the day when there aren't a whole lot of clouds. Now this is another day. This is April 28th. And he's coming to the north. And you can see the visibility on the west side over the Catskills is better than to the east towards the Hudson Valley. And the air over here is moisture, so you do have some clouds here where it's blue over the Catskills. And there he gets further into it. And again, right along this edge is where the convergence is. And you can see that the lift on the west side and the clear air side is better and higher than what you have on the riverside. This is coming up on the Ashokan, and this is on the way back. You can see the differences in the clouds. I mean, look at the base of that one compared to the bases down here. So this is a day where there was more moisture. And he's going north up towards Slide Mountain here, and you can see the stuff hanging down with the shelf over here. This is where you want to be. I've had days like this where, you know, it looks good out to the west. I'll have 5 or 6 knots in this line here. I'll go out west, and the average cloud is pulling with 2 knots. You have that much of enhancement from the two, even though they're not greatly dissimilar, the two air masses coming together. So you can see just the stuff hanging down here and here and here. So the line you want to follow is just on the west side, the upwind side in this case. This is going back. So I'll go back now to some screenshots from different places around the world with more defined convergences. I've seen it over the Hudson Valley with maybe up to 3,000 foot difference in cloud base over a period of a mile or 2 or 3. So it can be very pronounced. But this is Rieti. The guys down in Rivasandali, like where I landed out to practice, and you can see the difference from one valley, just going across one valley in the cloud base. And this is coming up to that jump-off point to cross that pass I talked about earlier. You look at the difference in the cloud bases between the maritime air off the Adriatic to the right and the air over the central plateau. And this is beyond that pass now. Look at the difference of the cloud bases over there compared to over here. And this is right where you want to be, under this shelf, for the best lift. And this is a screenshot from New Zealand. I have a couple screenshots from there too. I mean, they have convergence all over the world. New Zealand's got a lot of ocean influence. So the same kind of stuff you see with the upper shelf and the lower clouds. And then South Africa, they had a canceled day at the Nationals, and they had convergence on a canceled day. You can see the clouds hanging down. You know you want to be up to the left underneath the shelf there. And then over in England, on a screenshot, the sea breeze. sea breeze is a convergence too, and you get those tendrils forming right where the air is coming in, it's getting sucked in, you get the warm air over the land, it's going up, and it needs to get replaced from somewhere, so you get cooler air coming in from the sea, it's moister, and so it's going to condense earlier, and you wind up with those tendrils indicating where it is. And that's New Zealand, Omarama, same kind of deal with the stuff hanging down. That's about all I have. Anybody have questions?
One question.
How far up did you go, Daniel, on those your flights? How far did you go?
The furthest I went up to was Hunter Mountain. No, not Hunter Mountain, Freehold. I made it up to Freehold.
Oh, you went to Freehold?
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the convergence. It just depends on how it sets up that day. The northern escarpment there runs from just north of the Ashokan Reservoir all the way up around the north end past Freehold, and it's pretty defined. And we have the convergence set up there a fair amount of the time.
Well, on the Catskills, that eastern escarpment is pretty steep.
Right.
And it's pretty much a line.
Right.
Never been up that far, but I've seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the whole thing. It sort of explains why I've had so few Hudson River crossings in my soaring life, even though I've flown out of Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York for over 50 years. I mean, I've crossed the Hudson 3 or 4 times, because that flow comes off of the ocean and goes up there, and it just pretty much kills everything. If you have a nice day with 20 knot winds up aloft, where it blows all of it out, and then you can have Q coverage going across that river valley, you can make it. But it's pretty wide across, and to try to cross it with all the maritime air coming in is normally a chore.
Could you describe some of the dynamics? They were talking about that eastern-facing slope of the Catskills being very hard in certain places. Can you describe some of the dynamics of the warming sun in the morning on that also influences your flight decisions in that region?
Yeah, well, the convergence won't be really working early in the morning. It takes a while for all that, the heating and the whole system to work up, and that sucking action of the mountains to work. So earliest I've seen it kick in is probably 11 or 12, and then it really cranks up for the afternoon. So early morning flying, I tend to try to, go upwind and not get caught downwind and low. And so I generally don't go for the eastern edge of the escarpment in the morning. You will sometimes see clouds starting to form there, but I've normally wound up with clouds up in the Wyndham High Peak area and all, where I've been able to launch from there, and then by that time there's clouds sort of popping everywhere, and I'll pick my lines. I tend to try to fly upwind, and then if I get in trouble, at least I can park somewhere at zero sync and get blown downwind towards home, and not have to worry about a retrieve on a lot of my local flying anyway. So I really don't, I don't use that eastern escarpment. I know it's sharp-faced and it faces the sun and all, but I don't use that.
It's just not that strong.
It's not that strong. No. I mean, the convergence we have, and I mean, like I said, I've seen 2,000-3,000 foot difference in cloud bases and all on occasional days, but more often than not, it's like the days where Daniel took pictures, and you really have to have sort of a sharp eye to say, oh, that's where it is. It's not, poking your eye out with a huge difference. So it's one of those things you say, oh, well, yeah, it's working today. It's not really obvious, but the lift's going to be 2-3 knots better there if I go there.
Thank you.
John?
I just want to share something that you go to Saint-Auban in France, where they have the big high altitude training center, very famous. It's in the southern Alps, and you have a quaint little French town with a beautiful big glider airfield. And at the time, there was a big chemical plant there. It was kind of out of place, but that's what they had. And it was kind of interesting because in the morning, you'd see the smokestack fumes always be coming out of the mountains downhill. And at the airfield, it's very handy, because you just look at it, and you wait till about 10 or 10:30, and the flow switches, and the air is now going into the mountains. That's what you say.
Yeah, then you know the mountains are
And
working.
that's the time when you should launch. And if you launch before the air switches, you probably won't be very happy with what you find. And then when the air switched and the valley breeze is going into the mountains, now you're going to be good. And then off you go on these nice little flights.
Doug?
Yeah, like, when we were going to France, I did a, probably bad translation, you could probably improve on it, of the Calcroft book, Techniques for Mountain Soaring. I circulated it around to the team members. I'm happy it's still around. I'm happy to email it to anybody who wants it. It's specifically aimed at, you know, the high stuff like you're showing in the 80 or in the Alps, but I found it broadly applicable to.
Yeah, I mean,
situations as well.
I've figured out that mountain systems are mountain systems, and that, you know, the Catskills are not high by any means, but they're big enough for this methodology to apply to, that it actually works.
So if anybody wants a copy, just email me or I'll give the annual copy or something.
All right, well, time.
But we notice that Blairstown, and I guess everyone in the east does it, late April, early May, before the leaves come on the trees, it's so much better.
Right, because the
As soon
sun
as
can reach all the way down
leaves
before.
out, things just get much slow, you know, the kernels die.
Yeah, lunchtime?
All righty, let's give a hand for Mike.